Hello, I'm going to share with you what a split break or split log is in comparison to your typical 10-hour break. And there's a couple of things that I'm going to write up over here that you have to remember. One thing is 8-hour break in sleeper berth. Pauses your clock. Okay? So that's one very important thing. Has to be in sleeper berth. An 8-hour break in sleeper berth pauses your clock. So let's use this scenario where you start your day with 11 hours to drive, 14 hours to work. And you drive and you're on duty, and you drive, and collectively you stop here at this point, and you've driven, let's say you drove here 3 hours, here you drove 2 hours, and you spent 1 hour on duty. So in collection, you have 5 of your drive hours that you've used, and you've used 1 work hour, so you have used 5 and 6. So that means that at this point you have left 6 and 8. 6 hours to drive, 8 hours to work. Now let's say at that juncture you go into sleeper berth. Okay? So your sleeper berth for 8 hours, not 7 hours and 50 minutes or 7 hours and 30 minutes, 8 hours. At 8 hours, you will wake up or be able to get out of sleeper berth with the exact same hours that you went into sleeper berth with. So let's say you arrive at a shipper or a consignee and you immediately go into sleeper berth while you're waiting because they tell you have to wait. And let's say they make you wait 7 hours. Well, just wait another hour and you literally have paused your clock. You have to wait 1 hour to keep going with your 10-hour, with your 11 and 14, or you'd have to wait 3 more hours to get your full clock back. So you may as well wait the 1 hour and then you can keep driving, and I'll show you what happens after that. So now you continue to drive. You have 6 and 8, your clock paused, you continue to drive, you go on duty again for a little bit, you go off duty for a little bit to take your 30-minute break, you go on and you drive. And let's say you drive 3 hours here, you have a half an hour here on duty, you have a half an hour here off duty, and you have 1.5 hours here that you drove, and then you stop. So now, of the 6 and 8, you've driven 4.5, and you've worked another half hour, and you've had a half hour off duty. But from a 11 and 14 hour perspective, that half hour off duty still counts towards your work clock. So you have used in this juncture, just like we have here, so let's do minus a total of 4.5 over, add another hour to that, 5.5. So that would equal 1.5 over 2.5. So you have now at this juncture, when you stop, you have 1.5 hours left to drive and 2.5 hours left to work in total. So now let's say you go back into sleeper berth. Okay? Sleeper berth. Now, we now come to the second rule that you have to remember, which is a 2-hour break does not pause your clock. Okay? So a 2-hour break does not pause your clock. So at the end of 2 hours, because that's your split, you take your 10-hour normal break and you split it 8 hours and 2 hours. So you have 2 hours here. So now at 2 hours, you're going to have 2.5 of these hours burned, right? And the first hour of this burn is going to be free, right? It's work hours, not drive hours. So at 1 hour, you're going to wind up with 1.5 and 1.5. At the end of 2 hours, you'll still have a half hour to drive and you'll have a half hour to work. So that's what you wake up with at the end of a 2-hour break in this scenario, okay? Plus, so this is where it gets interesting, and this is the third rule of a split break. Plus, all of the time you used prior to your prior break. So that's the third rule. In a split break scenario, you have drive work time left, plus time of drive work used prior, whoops, that's an R, to your prior break. So there's 2 priors in there, but it's very important. When you wake up from this 2 hours, your prior break was this 8-hour break. So everything you used prior to your 8-hour break was this 5 hours and 6 hours. So you add the 5 and 6 up here. So you wake up on that 2-hour break with 5.5 hours to drive and 6.5 hours to work. Now on top of that, once you start driving again, let's say you just drove straight for 5 hours and you went off duty or went on duty for a short time and then stopped there. So half an hour here. So in this case, you would have driven 5 and worked 5.5. So you would subtract that from this here, and you would wind up, when you go on this break, you would have 0.5 left, and you would have 1 hour of work. And then you would go in sleeper berth. If you went sleeper berth for 8 hours again, and you come off that break, you've now paused that clock. So in this case, you paused your clock. So you still have the 0.5 hours to drive and the 1 hour to work. Plus, you would have whatever time you used prior to your prior break. And now you're to this time that you used after this 8-hour break, which is the time you used prior to this 2-hour break. So you can imagine if you continue with this, it keeps leapfrogging. So the next time would be this 5 and 6 after your next 2-hour break, and so on and so forth. And depending on the kind of freight you're moving or the circumstances, this could be very advantageous to you. So again, let's finish this out here. You got 4.5 hours that you gain back to drive and 5.5 hours to work, so you now have 5 hours to drive and 6.5 hours to work after you come off of this 8-hour break. So the board, I've really expanded it over the whole board, but suffice it to say that every break allows you to recapture the time prior to the prior break. That's really important to remember, prior to the prior break. And the 8-hour break pauses your drive clock, and the 2-hour break does not pause your drive clock. The 8-hour break must be in sleeper berth. It cannot be off duty. Must be in sleeper berth. The 2-hour break doesn't really matter. Can be off duty, can be sleeper berth. It'll respond the same way. So that's a split break. I'll post this on the website so we can look at it. You guys can watch it a couple times. If anybody sees that they need to use it and has a question about it, if a DM has a question, wants to explain it to a driver, please see me. Thank you.